The Dice Tower is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. This episode is sponsored by the Op, also known as USAopoly.
The Dice Tower, episode 656, El Paso.
Welcome to The Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them.
In today's show, we discuss some games that we've gotten to play together, and we introduce a brand new segment. I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Andy Hutchinson.
And I have gotten to see you so much this week, Mandy. It's been really cool. I love technology.
Right? It's so funny, like how we just have to be basically in our houses and all day and all night, and we get to talk more. We should be doing this anyway.
I agree, and we should prioritize it because we've been really taking advantage of all the different websites and services out there to play games with our own friends individually, but also with each other. So it's not often that we get to talk about games that we've gotten to know by playing primarily with each other, Mandy. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yes, me too.
But you played an RPG without me, and you've told me a little bit about it, and I'm so envious. And is this something that's actually going to air, or was it just for funsies amongst friends?
So it was kind of both. So funsies among friends, but it is also on YouTube. So
oh, cool.
Which is great. So you can go back and check out the hilarious moments in this. So first, let me start off by saying we played it on Game All Night Show, and the RPG we played was Fiasco Museum. So I don't know if people are familiar with this RPG, but it was new for me. I haven't played an RPG since I was like 10. So I literally had to start from the beginning, but everybody was fantastic. I played with Chris Whitpen, who basically led us through the RPG, Paula Deming, Joe Sondow, Ruel Gaviola, and Victor Schwartzmiller. So everybody was hilarious. And it literally is exactly what the title says. We were in a museum. We somehow turned it into a like junior high field trip to the museum. And there was like a lunch lady in there and like sticky fingers and, you know, just some really cool characters. I think my face hurt the entire time because I was laughing and smiling so much because everybody I played this with was just so fantastic. So, you know, I feel like maybe I was the least funny of the group, but still funny. So that should tell you how good it was.
I did. I'm so glad to hear it's on YouTube, and I will make sure to check that out because I love RPGs, and seeing you play an RPG, I can't wait.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh my goodness, I just have so many things. I'm just taking up all the talk time here. So was possibly the last podcast that we did. We talked about a game, Tranquility. So I didn't have all the information, but funny enough, they listened to the show. So they sent me some information to share with all of you if you were interested in getting the game. So the MSRP for the Kickstarter edition of Tranquility is £15, but they'll be selling it on worldwide through Amazon or eBay or potentially both. And once they have actual copies to sell, so we still have a bit of time to wait for that, and that should happen within the next couple of months. So if anyone's looking for it, there's the info.
Well, I would like to pick up a copy, so I'm excited to hear that because I actually really enjoyed the play. Although it's interesting, I never really, it's unusual, I think, to see people prioritize eBay. Like, oh yeah, it'll be on Amazon or through distribution or direct from our website. But eBay, that's interesting. Okay, works for me.
eBay was the thing for me. That was my jam so many years ago. I'd be on there nonstop. So I think eBay still a lot of people use it. So maybe that's why they're tapping into that. Who knows?
That does not surprise me at all.
Okay, the last thing, I swear, because we're running out of breath here. We're talking about so many things. Kickstarter, I've been on there a little bit. And a game that's on there that I played at AirCon was The Defense of Procyon 3 by David Turksey and published by PSC Games. And it's on Kickstarter now. 15 days left at the time of this recording. So I'm talking about it a little bit. So I'm not getting into detailed gameplay here because, well, we all know my memory is very poor. But I can let you know that first glance at this game, I was like, oh, this looks like a war game. Nothing wrong with war games, just not something that I play a lot of. And the description was, well, it's a war game for Eurogamers. Oh, is it now? All right, well, let's give this a try. David's like, sit down, try it out. Can I just tell you, I actually really liked it. Now, we didn't play a full game, but we played a lot of it. And it's an asymmetric war game for Eurogamers. So you can play it cooperatively, but there's also a competitive aspect as well. So basically the person I was sitting beside, we would kind of work together. The people across from us, they were working together, but they were against us. And it was really cool because it was, okay, I'm going to say this and I'm going to regret it, but it had a little bit of programming in it, which I had to, people had to use and I had to use. And they're like, but Mandy, you don't like programming. But here it worked together and you could still have conversations with your partner to figure out how you can best win the game. And I was working on the terrain, so the kind of more wargamey part that you think of, while my partner was working in space. So we had to work together because both of those could come together, the space and the terrain, to destroy our opponents. Okay, that was just, took me over there a little bit. So all that to say, don't look at it as a Eurogamer and say, ugh, war game, that's not for me. Honestly, I was really surprised at how well played, and it was actually not too bad to pick up the rules. Explanation was really clear on the sheets provided. So The Defense of Procyon 3, by David Turksey, published by PSC Games, is on Kickstarter now, and it's just definitely worth taking a look.
Awesome. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of descriptive words in that game that I would not see appealing to you. So I think It really says something that you're pretty positive on it.
Yeah, so I'm definitely looking forward to getting a full playthrough of it, but just don't be scared. Give it a go.
Alrighty. Well, from one space game that you like to another space game, let's see what you think about that one.
So, what have you been playing lately?
We segued with space games, but I'm going to jump in because I want to talk about my train game first. Ha-ha!
Well, you know what? It's okay. I know people are waiting, with bated breath to hear me talk about my space game, but you go ahead.
Actually, they probably are, Mandy. You've developed quite the reputation, so we'll draw out the anticipation a little bit and talk about trains first.
Okay.
And this is a game that you and I have actually gotten to play together, which is wonderful.
Yes.
We're talking about Traintopia that Mandy and I got to play on Tabletopia together. There you go.
Right.
So much Topia everywhere. This is from Board and Dice as a publisher. The designer is Przemek Wojciech, and the illustrators are Jakub Fajtanowski and Zbigniew Mgalter. Traintopia is a tile placement game with drafting in it. And basically you're going to get these little cardboard tiles that have rail lines printed on them and other little features. The rail lines may go over different colored terrain, like the yellow terrain or the green terrain, or there may be little sightseeing things around it, like a little amusement park or a forest nearby, that kind of thing. So you have these little tiles that have those visual elements on it. There are also wooden bits in the game. There are meeples that are gray, green, or yellow. Those are your commuters. And you have meeples that are white. Those are your tourists. And then there's also a train piece and blue mailbag pieces. So you have all these little wooden bits and you have all these tiles and some point tokens and all that other stuff. Basically, what's going to happen is you're going to draft something, place it, and move on. You play through a set number of rounds, and the person with the highest score at the end of the game wins. Now, first of all, the game is set through round cards, and you're going to shuffle them up and then flip them over, and the round card will tell you what you have to choose from in drafting. And it's going to be a mix of tiles and those wooden bits. So maybe you get 5 tiles and 2 random commuter meeples and a tourist and a train. And all those go out in the center of the table, and then you just go around the table and draft. You place what you get immediately, and you go from there. Well, first of all, this immediately kind of feels different, is the ability to draft the tiles or the wooden pieces and the choices that you have to make there. I really, really like that element. The train tiles, you're just trying to do what you typically would think you're doing, where you're trying to extend your train line and make it work together and line up the rail pieces, the rail like illustrations as best you can. One of the neat things is that the tiles are separated into like a little 2x2 grid, and you can offset the alignment by half. So even though you have a square tile, you can actually only overlap it by half the tile, which creates some interesting pathing. And it also creates some interesting tile placements because you can work yourself into a position where you realize, oh, I've kind of created this little curve where I can't fit another tile. So I have to get a train that goes in a certain direction. That's not a bad thing at all. It's just a nice little twist to kind of traditional tile laying. It's a little something extra to take into consideration as you're going. Now, if you choose to take some of those wooden pieces, those usually go on one of the rail lines that you're working on. The meeples score immediately. So those yellow, green, and gray meeples are going to score based on the number of terrain squares that are underneath your rail line. So a yellow meeple placed will score all the yellow squares underneath that rail line. Or the tourist meeple will score all the sightseeing things around, like directly adjacent to your rail line. And those have different points, 3, 2, or 1 points. And you add them all up and then you score immediately and then you're done. Each rail line can only hold one of each piece of wood though. So there's a little bit of a timing thing. You're like, oh, I've got 3 yellow terrain tiles right now, but if I get that one that's in the draft pool, I can get 2 extra points if I wait and then draft that meeple. But what if Mandy takes the yellow meeple before I get to it? As she has. Or what if she takes the tile that I want instead? So there's that typical kind of, because it's all open, you know what's available, you know what people are trying to get. So I wouldn't say there's a lot of denial drafting in this game. That's just not how it feels to me. But there is an interesting strategic planning element because of that in this one. At the end of the game, trains are going to score based on some money tokens that get scattered around. And the mailbag will end up doubling the railroad score because you're going to score, hey, how many tiles does this rail line use up? Oh, you're going to get a certain number of points. The longer the rail line, typically the better. There's blue stations and red stations to close them off. You get points for that kind of thing. You do, at the beginning of the game, have objective cards. So you have kind of a personal objective that you're trying to work towards that will score if you achieve that. And there's like a little end game bonus that kind of helps the person who's running behind because there's some little extra bits at the end of the game that you get to draft based on who's got the fewest points at that time, which is kind of cool. It kind of helps you feel like you're never really out of it, or at least you have something extra to hope for at the end of the game. And I really like that element too. You go through the rounds, you draft the stuff, you place the stuff, you score the stuff. Ta-da! Traintopia. Now, Mandy, I got to play this with some of my other friends online, and then you and I have gotten to play it together. What did you think of it?
I really liked it. Let's just start off with that right off the bat. I really liked it. Now, I have difficulty with games that rely on any type of spatial relations of any sort or any kind of spatial reasoning. So for me, I had a hard time with thinking, okay, is this the best way to put it? So that sort of thing. But it didn't dissuade me from enjoying the actual game. I did like the fact that, you had those tough decisions where you're like, I really could use that, yellow meeple to score here, but then that tile could potentially work for me later if I continue, making my rail longer. So it's kind of one of those things where you kind of have to plan, but at the same time, you don't want somebody else to get it and score another 13 points, but do you want to kind of stop them from doing it to, not do something great for you? So that whole conversation I'm having with you right there are the thoughts that you have when playing. So I really liked it. I liked that kind of decision making that I had to do, whether it be for right now or for future. But I also like that I could score different things. So in our game, I was really behind, like really behind. And I didn't win, but I managed to, pull it up in different ways. So I was able to score like a longer rail, more than Suzanne. So I liked the fact that there were different ways to score and I could pull up quickly in the game.
Yeah, I thought that game in particular was really great to see that you closed that score gap in the way the end game worked out. And I thought that was really fun. Now, I will point out that we have been playing this on Tabletopia. I do have a physical copy of the game. So in the physical game, the tiles are cardboard tiles and, the little tokens are cardboard tokens and the meeples are wood. In Tabletopia, it's all digital, of course. Now, I think I really enjoyed playing it in Tabletopia. I will enjoy it more physically because one of the fiddly things in Tabletopia is that you're trying to align these rail tiles, and because they can offset from each other, making things line up nicely can be a little tricky in Tabletopia as you're rotating them and sliding them around and things like that. Whereas with a physical table, it's much simpler, right? And it's tactical as you have it in front of you. So that's one interesting thing in the difference between playing digitally and playing physically. I think I will enjoy it more physically.
Right.
That said, in Tabletopia, I really enjoyed Traintopia. The drafting of the tiles and the bits and the way the bits score, it differentiates the game. It lets it stand out a little bit from all the tile laying and all the drafting games out there, right? Because there's a lot of these style of game. So new ones, I feel, have to bring something, a little twist. I don't need a huge twist. I just need a little twist to have it grab me. And Traintopia has that little twist. There's, of course, some strategic little details that we didn't talk about. There's some flexibility in cash tokens and how you can rescore different colors of terrain and all this other stuff that really work in the game really, really well. The one thing that didn't pop for me is the train meeple. The way that scores is you put it on a rail, and it will score points based on the number of these little cash tokens that you can get around. But ultimately, the math never seemed worth it. The cash tokens were going to get me more points if I spent them on something else as opposed to leaving them to score the train. Normally, that's not a big deal to me because who cares? You're scoring points and you're optimizing, and that's the game. But it's a train game, and it's the train meeple. So I wanted it, of all the nitpicky things, and yes, this is very nitpicky, of all the nitpicky things, I wanted that train meeple to feel more important because it's a gosh darn train game. But there you have it. I mean, that's ultimately a fairly small consideration because you can still do all your point planning and things like that as you would in any lovely game. It's pretty light. I would say it's going to take you about 45 minutes to play. And this one was a pleasant discovery. I really enjoy it, and that is Traintopia.
All right. Well, now we have, boarded the train. We've gotten off the train, and we're exploring space. Okay. Yeah. Space Explorers. That's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay. No, that was terrible. But that's okay. I tried.
A for effort.
Okay, so the game I'm going to talk about next is Space Explorers. This is designed by Yuri Zuravlyov. Art is by Alexei Kot and published by 25th Century Games. This retails for about $25 US and Canadian. For anybody who hasn't listened to the podcast before, I'm sourcing these prices from Board Game Bliss, which is a Canadian website to purchase games, and Cool Stuff Inc., which is showing American pricing. This game plays 2 to 4 players in about 20 to 40 minutes. Now, I have the physical copy of this game, but Suzanne and I played it on Tabletopia. So that's kind of the experience I'll be talking about. So in Space Explorers, the premise behind it is that you're head of a research and development hub in a space research center. All right. And you're competing with the other hubs in the golden age of astronautics. Sounds very fun. In the game, what happens is we have our own hub area where we'll be placing cards, kind of almost like a tableau setting, and they have different colored slots, so to speak. Each player has that in front of them. And there's going to be a display of cards that we can take from and a deck of cards that we can also take from or to fill the display. And then we also have some objectives, which we can complete with specific cards. Now, this is another way to end the game by completing all of the objectives, because we only get so many based on players, or if players have a certain amount of cards in their display, I believe it's 12. On your turn, what you're going to be doing is you've got a couple of options. You can take a specialist card into your hand. So specialist cards will have certain symbols on them that can be used to complete objectives. But these are things we want to try and get into our tableau, so to speak. And the icons on the cards are called research icons. So those are the icons we want to display in our tableau area. And depending on how many cards you have in the tableau of a certain color, you may get a discount, so to speak, of placing that card in a certain slot. This sounds really kind of hard to picture, but it's really that basic, that straightforward. Mm-hmm. So that's one option. You can take a specialist card into your hand. Okay. The next thing you can do, if you don't want to do that, is recruit a specialist to the hub. So basically you can take one, I'm going to take that specialist in the display and put it directly into your hub, meaning you meet all the requirements on the card in order to place it in that division of your hub. The game ends, like I said, when all objectives are completed or player recruit 12 specialists into their hub. Now, something I didn't mention is that we have research tokens, which we can also spend in order to get these researchers into our hub area. The fun thing here is when you spend them, I believe it goes to the player on your left. So we played with 2. I've played it since with a few people. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it goes to the player on your left of whatever tokens you're spending to get that card into your hub. So you're like, well, how am I going to get them back? Keeping in mind that it goes in that direction for everybody, so if somebody else spends, it'll come to you eventually, so you hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the overall gist of the game. This is a game, I'll just start off from the top. I liked it. So there's a bit of inflection in my voice because I liked it. I didn't love it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why. And then, Suzanne, please feel free to jump in as well because you have also played it. I've played it with several player counts. I've played it with 2, 3, and 4. It was fine with 2. I think I preferred it at a higher player count. But even at the higher player count, there were some things that concerned people. So with 2, it just goes back and forth, right, with the tokens. So you can literally see, yeah, I'm going to get those tokens back at some point, potentially. There's a higher chance of that. When you play with 4 players, there was a point in the game where someone didn't see tokens for the entire game. So they had research tokens that were spent, and it's like, well, I guess I'm never seeing those red tokens again. They just never made their way back around. So it almost seems like a 3-player count is like the sweet spot for this game. So you are more likely to at least get some tokens back of a specific color. So the player counts are a bit tricky to see what works. It reminded me a little bit of Splendor, which is something else,
Sure.
a group, they kind of said something very similar. And for those of you who are not familiar with Splendor, it has the same kind of mechanics where you have to get so many, in Splendor, you have to get certain types of gems in order to get cards from the display, for you to bring in. And then you get kind of a discount, quote unquote, when you're getting other cards based on the gem on the card you purchase. It had a very similar vibe in that aspect. So Splendor for me is like one of those games. It's fine. I mean, I get it. I see why everybody likes it. And so that mechanic for me is, what's the word I'm looking for? It was okay for me, but I could see why it would appeal to other people. So the mechanic was familiar, I guess is what I'm getting at. So people might like that. I did find the game was overly complex for what it was. I gave you a very basic overview, but the rulebook was a little all over the place, wasn't very clear in certain things. Like there were some rules that we had to really interpret, and it makes a bit difference in how you play the game because certain things may be worth points that you didn't think were worth points. So that's more of a rulebook issue, but that needed to be clear in order to really understand the mechanics of the game. So I liked the art. I would have liked to see some variation because it literally was, a researcher looking at their telescope from a distance. And then there's another shot where it's like a little bit closer of the same researcher and then right up close of that same researcher. The art was very like retro style, kind of like 50s or 60s. I really liked it. Would have liked to see some variation. Overall, gameplay is familiar. Like I said, if you are familiar with something like Splendor, it was fine. For me, was it breaking barriers? No, but I think overall people will enjoy it, probably most likely at a 3-player count.
I think that's really interesting about the player count thing. I really liked the token element because you knew by using it, you were giving it to an opponent.
Right.
And I think in 2 players, there's an extra kind of tug of war intention and a little bit more of an element of denial as well, because they're going to you're keeping a close eye on whether or not they can use it. I don't know if I loved it, but I thought it was interesting.
Sure.
I liked overall the way that you had those areas and each character fit in a certain genre or category, and you could score based on that. But really, where I got frustrated was that the way you're scoring those points through the mission tiles that you were going to get, you could get just edged out. And yeah, you know what your opponent is building up to, but it felt like there wasn't a lot of recompense. And once it was gone, it was gone. And depending on what tiles you had out there, you could be hosed. You could have been progressing towards that, and just because a competitor was also progressing towards it, you were out of it from that element. The aesthetic overall of the game is very, very cool. Just that vibe that you were talking about, the retro vibe. But ultimately, it did feel more like a slightly more complex Splendor, as you said. If that's what you're looking for, great. I would actually not mind playing it a few more times, but I'm not sure if I'm going to hanker for it long term. For me, I just don't know if it has a lot of staying power. I liked that resource management and token management, but right now, like we just talked about Traintopia, quite frankly, if I'm going to sit down between Traintopia or Space Explorers and I've got 45 minutes to crank out a game, I'm probably going to want to play Traintopia instead. So yeah, Space Explorers, it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah,
for me.
And I think we had very similar thoughts on that. So there you go, Space Explorers.
Well, I have been getting some game playing in with my family. I have 2 kind of young children, which leads you to interesting games sometimes, right? Because as a middle-aged gamer, I have different tastes than my, say, 8-year-old son. But that's okay, because we can still have fun together and connect over games, and that's one of the beautiful things about games. And right now, we are doing a lot of connecting over the Minecraft card game.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, this is published by Mattel, and everything else is uncredited. But aesthetically, it pulls directly from the visuals of Minecraft with that, the different resource blocks and all that other stuff, and the garish neon green and the earthy brown and stuff like that. This is really a mass market game. It's in an elongated card box. You can get it for like $12 at Target or what have you. It's very affordable. And what you're going to get in it is a big fat deck of square cards. There are resource cards and there are craft cards. There are also some TNT and creeper cards. Now, if you are familiar with Minecraft, all of this stuff will make sense to you. I only know Minecraft from watching my kiddos play it, so whatever from a theme point of view for me personally. But my 8-year-old flipping loves it. He loves it, and it clicks with him because it all feels familiar. And he's really pulling in his video game knowledge into the card game when we play it, to the point where sometimes he'll criticize the craft cards. Craft cards are like what you're trying to create, what you're trying to fulfill. Because he'll say, oh, well, in the video game, you don't need that to create a diamond pickaxe. What's going on here? And he gets very touchy about that. That's not historically accurate.
Oh, wow.
Okay, son. Anyway, you've got resource cards that just demonstrate a wood or gold or an iron ore and a certain number of them. And then you have craft cards, which are the gold cards that you're trying to create. And they're like recipes that you're trying to fulfill. Say you need 2 gold and 2 wood for a gold hoe, which thank God my son doesn't listen to the podcast because he would just criticize me all over the place for that inaccuracy.
Oh, no.
And it's all an open draft. So you lay out little stacks of the resource cards and flip over the top one, and you lay out little stacks of the craft cards and flip over the top card. And it really is just take some actions. You have actions. You take some resource cards, save them up, or spend them to complete craft cards. When you complete a craft card, they become a one-time use tool card. That's why I'm saying, oh, you can get a diamond pickaxe or you can get a gold hoe or whatever. And those have one-time use special abilities. Once you use it for its special ability, it just goes and becomes a scoreable card at the end of the game. Every once in a while, you're going to get a TNT card come up that blows up the top layer of the resource cards, and you can get a couple extra resources that way. And every once in a while, a creeper will come up. And if you don't have a sword tool that you had crafted earlier, then the creeper will steal a resource card and move on its merry zombie way. There is a point target that you're trying to hit based on player count. Those little craft cards are all worth different points, and the first player to hit the point target wins the game. The game is exceedingly simple. Similar to, we were talking about how Space Explorers is a slightly more complicated Splendor. The Minecraft card game, quite frankly, is a much simplified Splendor.
Oh, interesting.
And I say that in a very positive way because there is some core mechanical element that feels decent as we're going through this. Everything is open. Again, this is geared towards children. My 7 and 8-year-old, totally clicks with it, totally loves it. Everything's open. There's kind of that element you can kind of help them because you can see what they're looking at and help them make choices if you need to, that kind of thing. If you have kids that love Minecraft, this is a fine game. Is it a great game? No. Do I have fun playing it with my son? Yes. But a lot of the fun comes from his enjoyment and his immersion into the theme more than anything else. So if you want a lightweight, simple game with a Minecraft theme, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a Minecraft card game. Let's just say it's not something I'm going to be nudging my adult game group to play anytime soon.
Nothing wrong
that's
with
the
that.
Minecraft card game.
Nothing wrong with that. Listen, we all heard that episode of me playing, the Addams Family. Well, we won't go into it. Go back and listen to the episode. I am not here to judge.
Thank you. I feel so relieved.
All right. Well, My last game that I'm going to talk about today is The Rival Networks. Ooh. This is designed by Gil Hova. Art is by Heiko Gunther and Travis Kinchy, and it's published by Formal Ferret Games. It's for 2 players and plays in about 30 to 45 minutes. So I'm going to start off by saying that I have seen this played on Tabletop Simulator, and I played it myself on Tabletopia. So I do not have a physical copy, just going forward here. This was a Kickstarter, and unfortunately you cannot buy it but I think it is on pre-order for about 25 US, 35 Canadian. So you can definitely drop in and get that if you'd like it. So the Rival Networks it's a standalone version, basically, of the network. So for those of you who are familiar with the networks, like, is it the same thing? Kind of, sort of, but it's for 2 players. And it's basically you and an opponent. You have displays of 3 time slots at the start of the game, and you're going to start with 3 terrible shows. Yeah, anybody who's familiar with the networks knows what I'm talking about. Everyone's like, "What are you talking about?" Basically, in the game, you're running a network. You want to air good shows at the correct time slot that it's going to win a bigger audience. So, in the start of the game, you start off with 3 terrible shows, which you obviously want to kind of cancel or put in reruns so you can get some new ones in. There are also some goal cards that are out that you want to take a look at. So you can say, hey, this is something I want to do. So by the end of the season, you can work toward getting points toward that. And then they also have, what are those other cards called, Suzanne? The pink ones.
No, they're not the advertisements. There's the shows, the stars, and the ads.
Don't remember the technical term, but they're cards that basically give you abilities. So you can, once you have enough money generated from your ads that you can get some of these cards which give you bonus that you can use in a round. Sorry, I apologize. I don't remember the exact name for them. We also have other cards that you can get. So the ads, which Suzanne mentioned, which are basically going to generate money for us to get those fun cards. We also have more shows that we want to put in to replace those terrible shows we start with. And we also have celebrities that we want to pull in so they can, drive those ratings. So basically what happens is on a player's turn, you want to get a show. So you look and say, what show's going to work for me? And ideally you want to put it in the correct time slot. And doing so will actually push you up on that track more than if you put it on a time slot that doesn't match that show. Not a big deal. You'll still get points, just not as much. Then you move over across the board and you're like, look at this. I can get some celebrities and ads. Right? So this is where they're kind of lined up in pairs, sort of. So you basically have to get the 2 that are corresponding. So one of them might be great, one of them not so great, but you can hang on to them and then attach them to shows at a later time. You don't have to attach it right at that moment. Again, driving up money value and point value because you want to be ahead on those tracks versus your competitor for other bonuses. So you do this basically for 3 seasons. And at the end of each season, you're going to do scoring towards the goals that we talked about earlier. And at the end of the 3 seasons, whoever has the most, I guess is it the highest points on each track?
You get fan points. You collect fans, and there's different ways you get those fans. And whoever has the most fans at the end of the game wins. But you do get points at the end of the round and at the end of the game for how far you are on those tracks.
That's it. I always confuse those two. But yes, It's the points that you get. And those are counted with markers that you will get in the game once you move your pieces up on those tracks. And whoever has the most of those kind of fan points at the end of the game wins the game. Just thought I'd throw out I won a couple games. That doesn't happen too often, so I got to throw that out there.
Nice flex.
I know. Thanks. So, Susanna, like I said, played this as well as you've probably played it more than I have. But I like this one a lot. I liked the original Networks, and I'm going to start off by saying the comedy in it is hilarious. I don't want to give it away in case you are thinking about getting it, but the cards, the shows are basically, comedic version names of shows that actually exist, and they are hilarious, and that continues into this game. So kudos to whoever's doing that. I don't know if it's you, Gil, but it's fantastic. You're still getting the same feel in this game as the Networks, but it's more streamlined and in a shorter amount of time. Like this plays in about 45 minutes, so I could play this during my lunch break. Woo! I'm all about those kinds of games where I'm still getting the feel of the game, but in a short amount of time. The question to me is, do you need both? And I guess it would just depend on how many players you're going to play it with. If you play more 2-player games, this may be the way for you to go. If you have a short amount of time to play games, this might be the way to go. But if you are obviously wanting to play in a bigger group, you may want to go into the Networks, which does have the same kind of idea. It's just a bit crunchier than the 2-player version. Do you want to add anything, Suzanne? Because I know you've played this as well.
What I'll say is I really, really liked this game. Mm-hmm. I call these styles of games lane battlers. So think about Battle Line.
Yes.
Right? Or Lost Cities, where you're playing cards and you're kind of vying for control across the table. Now, this one this one's more complex than those games, and there's much more intricacy in how you go around these tracks. I really liked the way that you were looking at the shows and the time slots and figuring out when it made sense to switch out a show or when it didn't. I really like how you draft a star and a, what is it called again? An ad?
Yeah,
at the same time, right? Because you're trying to figure out, well, I really want it made an extra layer to the decision that I thought was interesting in terms of how you play those things, when you rotate shows into reruns, all that. I thought they were really interesting decisions. It played quickly. It has a cool aesthetic. It has all those goofy show names that I admit I rolled my eyes at a number of them, but they did make me smile, even if I was slightly exasperated with them. And I didn't know what to expect. I like the networks. I think I like rival networks a little bit more. Just in terms of enjoying two-player games and how they balance out, I like that lane element. I like that control of the time slot element. It played so smoothly. This is a winner for me, and I am very excited to get a physical copy of this game now. And I'm going to be playing it on Tabletopia until I can do that, just because it's grabbed me that much. So, Rival Networks is a real winner from my perspective as well.
Yeah, and one of my friends who played it with had the same sentiment as you. She thinks that she enjoyed this version just a little bit more. The other one was good, but she thinks this is one that will get to the table just a little more frequently than the original. So yes, the Rival Networks. I also am looking forward to grabbing a copy myself.
Cool. Well, Mandy, it has been a little while since we have done everybody's favorite segment, One and Done. Maybe it's time to take a look at the dimmer side of gaming for us.
Have you checked out the Ops Harry Potter Hogwarts battle? In this cooperative deck building game, the forces of evil are threatening to overrun Hogwarts Castle, and it's up to 4 students to ensure the safety of the school by defeating villains and consolidating their defenses. Players take on the role of a Hogwarts student: Harry, Ron, Hermione, or Neville, each with their own personal deck of cards that's used to acquire resources. By gaining influence, players add more cards to their deck in the form of iconic characters, spells, and magical items. Only by working together will players be able to defeat all of the villains, securing the castle from the forces of evil. You can get Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle at your local game store or online today.
Dearest game, it's not you, it's me. Except this time it very well may be you. Either way, you are a one and done. Best regards, me.
All right, one and done. Oh boy. I feel like this could go either way for me, but yeah, here we go. So, my one and done I'm going to talk about is Heart of Crown. I'm going to give a moment of silence because I know there are some die-hard people who really love this game. I'm sorry. Okay, so Heart and Crown, designed by Ginkgo. Art is by Haniwa Yuji Himukai, Midolor Shosuke Oide, and published by Japanime Games. Heart of Crown is a deck builder. And what you're trying to do is you are trying to have a certain prince, your princess, kind of like, I guess, ascend the throne, I guess is the main concept of the game. And you are trying to kind of do this by building a little tableau beneath, because you have to have certain cards in your tableau at the bottom. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Dale of Merchants in that kind of aspect. And you try to build up your deck like a deck builder to have strong cards in order to buy certain cards from the market to get them into your kind of tableau area, right? Because some of them have points, and this is what you want to get. You want to get to a certain amount of points and have your princess in this tableau so they can ascend the throne. That's like a basic overview of the game. There's a market where you can get cards which give you special abilities, and the cards have like kind of arrows on them, which allows you, so I play a card, if it only has 2 arrows, it means I can only play cards in those 2 kind of areas of the card. So if you have a card that has an arrow, you play another card that doesn't have an arrow, stops. You can't play any more cards. So you have to keep that in mind when you're playing out certain cards. So that was something different. How do I explain this game? Heart of Crown. It wasn't for me. Now, to be fair, and I have to be fair here, I don't love deck builders. And then on top of it, I'm not a huge fan of, these types of art in games. So that kind of threw me at first. I was like, okay, you know what? Let me just get past it. I've never played Dominion. There's a reason. It's just not a game that I'm particularly interested in. I'm not a big deck builder fan. My friends have that I played it with, and they were all feeling kind of meh. They're like, this game reminds me of a slightly more complex Dominion, but a lot of the base qualities of the game are exactly the same. And they said, I already own Dominion. It's pretty, the art is pretty basic, nothing offensive in it. Why would I just not continue to play Dominion? So they felt like it was almost like a rip-off Dominion, and they were felt a bit lukewarm about that, and I think that put them off. So they said, we're good. We don't need to play this game again. I'll be honest, my biggest issue with this game was the art. There were a couple cards that I thought we're just going to say slightly inappropriate for me, but I understand some people are into this style of art, and that's totally fine. Everyone likes different things. But just because the gameplay kind of riffs off a game that's already there, but it's so similar, it's doesn't really feel the need to go out and buy this. You would be buying it purely based on the fact that you liked the art. So Heart of Crown, I'm good. Once was enough, and it will be moving on to perhaps someone who may enjoy it more than I did.
Fair enough. And for me, my one and done, I'm kind of sad about this one, I have to admit.
Oh, no.
Wacky Races.
Okay. Oh.
So this was the Come On Games. It was a Kickstarter just a little bit ago based on the old 60s and 70s cartoons, Wacky Racers. I saw the Kickstarter and I remember the cartoon from being a kid, and I love the miniatures and all that other stuff. Of course, it's Come On. The miniatures are great. And the scenario which I got to play this game was amazing. So I played it at Dice Tower West, and I played it with, you form convention pals. People that you really only will ever get to see at a convention. But every time you see them at a convention, you want to make sure you sit down and play a game together, and you really enjoy your time together and that kind of thing. And I have this family that I'm convention pals with now, and they had their little daughter, oh my gosh, so adorable. I think 4 years old, so young. And we wanted to play a game together, and she got to pick the game, and she picked Wacky Races. So I'm super excited to play this game with my convention pals and this adorable little girl. Great. In some ways, this is a great example of where the gameplay situation can really elevate how you experience a game, because it was such a positive experience. Wacky Races, though, is a very simple game. Basically, it's a race game where you each get a character from the classic cartoon. You get some special ability cards related to that character, and of course, they're miniature. The racetrack lays out primarily in tiles or cards that you get. So you shuffle them up, and they're terrain. They have different kinds of terrain on them, and then you lay them out in a path. And there's Phase A cards and Phase B cards, and so you shuffle them up separately and deal them out and lay out your path. Great. And a little gas station goes in the middle where you can take a break. And then you have terrain cards. So again, this is very light, very simple, and they match the tiles that you just laid out. And on your turn, you can play any card. You get 3 cards. You can play any card to move forward 1 space. Ta-da! Great. You may move ahead again if you play a card that matches the tile you're on. Great. So you keep on doing that until you pass or you're out of cards. Then, as you've been playing and discarding cards, the last card that you discarded determines where the bad guy goes. So you have Dick Dastardly and Muttley the dog that are chasing you down. And if Dick Dastardly and Muttley end up in front of the entire race crew, then they lay traps for you that you'll hit and toggle and then have to deal with as you go through the race. Great. You keep on playing these terrain cards. You can play your special ability cards that help you avoid traps or that kind of thing, or move a little more efficiently. You can reset those cards at the gas station so you want to kind of play them out in the first half and then have them freshened up for the second half. And obviously it's a race game, so when you cross the finish line, you can win, or if you get farther after you've crossed the finish line, you can win. It's dead simple. It is perhaps too simple. And it is very luck-based with those cards, even with the special abilities. The fact that you can play any card and move forward 1, it's nice, especially for kids, because you're always going to be able to move forward a little bit, which is good. But I'll tell you, It was a slog to play this game. And I have no desire to ever play it again unless I get to play it with this family and that little girl because she was adorable and it was so much fun. And I loved the people I was with. I loved the environment I was playing the game. But even that could not save this game for me. And quite frankly, the 4-year-old got bored halfway through the game. I was like, okay, I'm going to go play with dolls now. So Wacky Races, it might hit that nostalgia spot for some of y'all. But keep in mind that this is the lightest of light games. And for me, it's not going to get another play. So that is my one and done.
And now let's look at the digital side of board gaming with Tap That App.
All right, well, there's no excuse here at all, but talking about apps is always a really good thing on our show, but these days, unless it's Animal Crossing, I got nothing. Sorry.
Oh, man. You know, it's okay. I think everybody needs to find something that brings them joy at home. And if Animal Crossing's that thing for you, I'm happy for you, Mandy.
All right.
But maybe for those times that your Switch runs out of batteries or something, I can introduce you to something else.
All right. I'm excited. Let's take it away here.
There is a new app, and I apologize up front. Right now, it is iOS only.
Oh, okay.
So Android, Steam, unfortunately not there quite yet. But the good news is for iOS, it's free. So, hey, there you go. This is A Pet's Life. Now, if A Pet's Life doesn't sound familiar to you, maybe Saikatsu does. So Saikatsu is a board game designed by Matt Loomis and Isaac Shalev, and A Pet's Life is a re-implementation of that game. And from what I understand, IDW is actually going to be releasing a version of the game with this theme as well. Saikatsu was originally released with a birds and flowers theme.
Very pretty.
Very pretty art and all that good stuff. Well, A Pet's Life takes a slightly different direction because it's the same exact gameplay, but now instead of these kind of painterly approaches with birds and flowers, now you get kind of cartoony drawings of pets on pillows.
Okay.
But the gameplay is exactly the same.
Oh, cool.
So there you go. A Pet's Life is just Saikatsu. Now, in Saikatsu or Pet's Life, basically it's a tile-laying game where you have a big board and you're going to be putting tiles out in turn order. As you place a tile, you are going to score the animal on them right away based on adjacency. But the pillows that are on the tiles score at the end of the game, and you score points based on how many of those pillows are in a row together. But the nice little twist to Saikatsu is it is based on your perspective. So even though the board is the same and all the tiles are scoring for everybody, you are scoring rows based on what you can see from where you are seated next to that board, which adds a little twist and really complicates the tile laying as you're kind of trying to think about the perspective of your opponents. Okay, if I put this, if I put this puppy on a red pillow here, that's good puppy scoring for me, but I can see Mandy's working on red pillows down that line, so I don't want to put it there. A nice little twist that kind of elevates a tile-laying game. And now we have an app version with these adorable little pets. It's a pretty simple app, but it does have a nice layer of polish on it. You can play it solo against 3 different levels of AI, it feels puzzly, which is nice, and it's a great little time killer. It plays very quickly that way. But it also has some online play, and even though it's pretty simple, I like the way they did it. You can online random match, and I think it's a little iffy whether or not you're going to find a random player to play against on that online random matching. But that said, you can play against friends that have the game as well. And the way they do this is through a code. So you create a room, you name the room, you give that room name to your buddies, they join that room. Bob's your uncle, you're playing A Pet's Life together. And I think for a system that doesn't have kind of online account building and stuff like that, that is such a simple and easy way to do online play, and it really works, and I like it that way. So kudos for that. Rules-wise, you link to a video, which I don't love that treatment in an app. It is what it is. I wish the rules were embedded in the app natively. That's always my ask, and it's surprising how often that is not included in a board game app.
Right.
Oh, well, it's a pretty simple game, and there's plenty of resources for you to learn the game in other ways. But, Saikatsu's a solid game. A Pet's Life is a solid app, especially if you're playing solo or with friends. Thematically, whether you like the cartoon animal pet treatment or whether you like the bird flower treatment, I think that's going to be personal taste. I don't think there's anything wrong with either. I think from a visibility point of view, it's pretty clean in the app. So, hey, A Pet's Life, Saikatsu, if that's your jam, if you've got iOS, it's free. Check it out. I really enjoy it, especially for solo play. I'm really enjoying it.
Order up!
And now, it's time to order up a slice of game pie.
Welcome, everybody, to a brand new segment in our episodes of the Dice Tower podcast, Game Pie. Game Pie! Now, what is Game Pie, you might ask? Some of you know us pretty well by now and know, well, Mandy, how do you feel about top 10s? How do you feel about doing top 10s?
Oh, top 10s. Well, I'll just cut straight to the chase. I don't like doing them. I'm not particularly good at doing them. I don't like doing them.
Right, and they're not my favorite thing to do either. I don't think I find them as stressful as you do, Mandy, but they're not my favorite thing to do. But it can be fun to think about games in categories or groupings the way that Tom and Eric do. They're going through the alphabet or they're looking back a certain amount of time and things like that. I just think it's like the ranking system and kind of the rigidity of the 10 number and things like that. But Mandy and I were talking and we're like, well, but it would be fun to have a way to talk about categories of games in a manner that doesn't force a ranking, but lets us kind of draw out some games that fit within a group that we'd like to chat about. Long story long, here we are with Game Pie. So what is Game Pie? Game Pie is our game group chat. It is a round, warm, comforting selection of games that everybody, well, we can enjoy, at least on some level. Yeah, well, you think about it, 10 is really an arbitrary number. Well, Pie is also an arbitrary number in some ways. So for us, Game Pie will be 3-ish games apiece that fit within whatever topic that we're covering in the segment. Maybe it'll be 3, maybe it'll be that 3.14, somewhere in that range. Game Pie. We hope you enjoy it. We had fun thinking about it. And let's face it, we were going to work in pastry into this podcast more officially sooner or later. It had to happen.
Absolutely. We got the riff on the math, riff on the pie. I mean, it just had to happen.
Today's Game Pie is all about games that we love, but don't love us.
Oh, boy.
We're talking about in the future, we can talk about games that make us laugh. Mandy wants to do games that can be played in Animal Crossing.
I couldn't help it, okay?
We have a bunch of ideas for Game Pie, and certainly if you have any topics that you think would be fun for a Game Pie, feel free to email us with those ideas. So, Mandy, with all of that intro, why don't you take it off with games that you love but don't love you?
Oh boy. Well, this is something. So let's start with this slice here. Let's go with Tramways. So Tramways is a fantastic game. Let's start off by saying that I love it, but again, does not love me. Anything to do with, kind of rail laying down, tracks or rails in order to deliver passengers from one point to another. It's all about making them happy. Well, this game makes me happy, but also reminds me how terrible I am at it. But I really like it because you're working off of other people's rails, but then you're giving them points. And long story short, I love the way it makes me feel and the fact that I have to make decisions. And when I play it next time, I'm going to do better next time. And I do like rail, those kinds of rail games. So Tramways for me, it's magnificent, but I'm just absolutely horrible at it.
Interesting. Do you feel like you struggle in general with pathing games like that, line planning games, or is there just something different about Tramways?
I find, in general, I think I have issues with those types of games, just the way my brain works. But games by this particular designer, I believe it's Alban VR.
Oh, yeah.
I love his games, but it's just, I think he's into math, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if he's a mathematician or has some background in math. Math was never my strong suit, so it's something that I have to work a little bit more to figure out, but I like the challenge. So his series of games in particular tend to leave me kind of, oh, this hurts, I'm bad, but it's so good. That kind of thought. So does that make sense?
It totally does. And I'm with you. Alban VR does some wonderful, wonderful games. Small Cities, oh, it's amazing. But boy, oh boy, does it hurt my noggin to play, but I love it.
Exactly.
Well, for me, a game I love, but I just struggle with, I'm going to be Magic the Gathering.
Ooh.
I have played Magic the Gathering for 25 years.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm still not good at it. Granted, I don't play it as intensely as core Magic the Gathering players. But what I found is in the early days of Magic the Gathering, when the sets were really straightforward, I could compete. I was okay. But as more and more cards came out and the tactics that you could use and the card abilities that were available became more and more complex, I completely lost the ability to see combos and how cards could work together and how to maximize or come up with really creative interlocking mechanisms between cards that I could thwomp with. And so for me, Magic the Gathering is a game I still absolutely adore, but I can only play it on a very casual, very light way. I tend to make themed decks that are really, really goofy and may or may not have a chance of winning, but at least I have fun playing them.
Right.
But boy, oh boy, I will tell you, if I play 100 games of Magic the Gathering, I will win maybe one of them.
See, and that's...
But I still love it.
That's it, right? And this one has been around for so long, but you're still able to find something in there that works for you.
Right.
Well, Magic the Gathering is also one that I played a lot when I was younger. No more. My brothers stole my entire deck. That's another episode in itself. Okay, so my next one I'm going to talk about is Food Chain Magnate. Now.
Oh, hey, crossover.
Oh my goodness, I just saw that. So everyone knows this is like one of my favorite games. If you've seen my top 100, it's pretty high up on the list. And you think I would be better at this game considering I work in human resources, and literally the whole premise is having a nice, oh my goodness, I was going to say that in French. Organigram, a good organizational chart, right? To work the game. Yeah. So in the game, you're trying to, deliver, your food from one place to another, in the most efficient way possible, using the right type of people to do it, using the right ads. I love the premise. I love the aesthetic because everyone knows I like that kind of 50s or 60s kind of vintage feel, and that does that. This is pure, you need to know what you're doing. If you do not know what you're doing, you make a little slip up, it is not super forgiving. Most people don't generally like games like that. This forces me to be a better player. Do you know what I mean? So it forces me to kind of use that part of my brain that maybe I just kind of coast on. Sometimes no, I really want to figure this out. And I play with people who are generally very good at this sort of thing. So it really helps me to learn other kind of ways that I can implement things the next time I play. Again, it kind of falls into that I'm not really good at it, love what the game is doing. I just want to try a different way of doing it and kind of work that brain muscle. So I know it's on your list too. So I don't know.
Yeah, we had crossover here.
Yeah.
So for me, Food Chain Magnate, I love this game as well. I'm on board with everything you said. I love that organizational chart as you're hiring different employees and things like that. And I'm actually pretty decent at that. I'm pretty decent with the tile lane and the pathing as well.
Right.
Where I completely lose it in Food Chain Magnate. And unfortunately, it's a critical part of the game, is the demand prediction.
Yes.
I simply cannot wrap my head around which places have which demand and planning around that. And I've played this game 5 times now, 6 times, somewhere in there. Still can't get it. I don't know where that blocker is in my brain pan, but it's not working. But I still have fun playing it.
Exactly. See? It's all good. Food Chain Magnate.
Race for the Galaxy is on my list of games I love, but I'm not great at. And, Race for the Galaxy is one of those games that expanded a lot, so it kind of shifted as you went. I did not like this game in card form originally. I just found the iconography really fussy and kind of frustrating to deal with. And then the app came out. This wonderful, wonderful app came out, and it kind of handheld me through the iconography and getting all this stuff to line up correctly. And that was all great. And then all of a sudden I was really sad. I sold my physical copy of the game. That's a different story. But what I found is I understand the mechanisms. I understand all the different actions and how the planets work together and how you can get resources generated. But for some reason, I cannot get those engines rolling consistently. Every once in a while, I get it going, and it's amazing, and it's so fun to play. But most of the time, I find I just really, really struggle to figure out, okay, am I going military or science, and how do I make these planets line up, or when do I make the decision to sell or generate or things like that? And there's always that element of predicting what your opponents are going to do to try to maximize on your actions, which I'm also very, very bad at. I'm very bad at reading other people in games. So overall, Race for the Galaxy, I don't think it's going to be a game I'm ever going to be great at. But boy, oh boy, I sure do enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I also sold my physical copy, but that's because I knew a lot of people who had it. And then I was like, oh, I really want to play this more and get better at it. So yeah, I have to agree with this. It's a good one. Next one I want to talk about is any exit game that has higher than a 3-star difficulty. I know that is like really specific.
No, I love it.
But the ones that have been coming out lately with the 2 kind of star, the 2-level difficulty, it's beautiful. I feel like I could handle, I could even play that solo, which I'm not a big solo game player, but I think I could do that. The 3-star and above, ooh, it gets a little crazy. So don't get me wrong, still love it. It's, we're having that conversation as a group, and I don't want to give too much about the premise here, but obviously, you're trying to, it's a puzzle game, right? You're trying to solve all the puzzles to get to the end and win. And I just find with the higher difficulty ones, and I have to be careful how I phrase this, it's not that it's too hard for me. I just have a very different way of thinking. And so sometimes the things in the game that people are like, oh, this is so hard. I'm like, actually, that's XYZ. And they're like, how did you figure that out? I'm like, oh, so easy. And then the stuff everyone's finding easy, I'm like, I 100% don't get what's going on right now. You know what I mean? So I just find it does force me to kind of think a little differently than I do, because I'm a bit weird in my thinking, but it's still useful or helpful. So again, I don't know how helpful I'm being in those 3 or higher star difficulty ones, but love exit games. Just those higher difficulty ones. Just it's a little tough for me to figure some things out. Takes longer. That's all.
Well, since you did a food chain Magnate and I kind of rode your coattails on that one, I'll switch it up and talk about Escape Tales. So Escape Tales is similar in that exit game strategy. I love exit. I love unlock. I love deckscape, all that good stuff. But what I found with Escape Tales, first of all, the system, the exploration system with the action tokens and the way the rooms lay out, I flippin' adore that system so much. I just love it. And while the story is very dark, I do enjoy the narrative that weaves through the game. But what I have found is Escape Tales is intense on math problem solving. A lot of the problems are very math heavy.
Right.
And I am not in any, I have trouble helping my 11-year-old with their math.
Math is tough.
Well, hey, new math is, because math has changed. Math has changed from what I did 30 years ago.
Absolutely.
Okay? So Escape Tales, I love so much about that game, but the puzzle solving is actually quite difficult for me. And if I wasn't playing it with a group of friends that happened to have some much stronger math skills, I would never make it through that game. Doesn't mean I don't like it. Just means I'm really, really bad at it.
And to be clear, I mean, it's really good to know, there are some things we're just really good at and some things, we need a little bit of help. That's okay. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you enjoy it. All
right. So we did 3 each, Mandy, but let's go for that 0.14. Let's stretch it.
Should I only talk about 0.14 of the game, maybe? Or, you know what? It's the first one. I'll toss everyone a bone. Okay, here we go. So my last one is Arboretum. Now.
I love Arboretum.
I love this game so much. I have 3 versions of it, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean I'm good at it. I've actually scored 0 in this game. If there was if there was a way to score negative points, I would have done it. So there's someone I played this game with where I scored 0, and they actually made me sign the sheet that we played with, and I put a little happy face in the 0. So if you're listening, I've kind of outed myself now, so feel free to share that with everyone. But Arboretum is great. I love the fact that you're laying out cards in, ascending order to try and get points. You want to have a lot of them of the same type of tree, but you can path them in different ways as long as it makes sense. Do you know what I mean? You can't diagonally go from a 1 to a 5, it has to flow. And there's some trickery in this game a little bit, right? You want to hold on to certain numbers because it can block people or potentially score you more points at the end. And you also have to have the most amount of a certain type of tree, card-wise number in your hand to either block somebody else from scoring or score yourself. So there's just so much going on in just this little card game, which I love. And I've taught colleagues at work. They really like it. I just love the feeling when I play it with other people. apparently I'm not very good at maximizing my paths. I think, yeah, this is great. And then I'm like, I have all the cards I need to score. And then I'll play with someone, they've one-upped me and like, actually, I have this many, so you're not scoring that path at all. I'm like, are you kidding me? And then I literally banked my entire turn on scoring like these 2 rows of trees. And now I've got nothing. I can't block anyone and I can't score. You'd think I'd learned my lesson by now, but no. So Arboretum, still love it. Haven't quite figured out the strategy there yet.
Yeah, it's a deceptively, like, it's so beautiful and it's just a deck of cards, but boy, oh boy, it is a brain burner.
It's a doozy.
Well, for me, the last one I'll bring up here is Specter Ops. I like hidden movement games in general. I find them really fascinating and I enjoy playing them. And I think Specter Ops really broke through when it came out and did something a little different than some of the previous hidden movement games out there. But I am so bad at these games. And really, all I can say, and I'm bad at being the one and I'm bad at being the many. I'm bad at both sides of it somehow. And the analogy I can make is, you know, when you play hide and seek with little kids or like cats,
yes,
and they're hiding, quote unquote, hiding like under a sheet in the middle
right,
of a freshly made bed, and there's like a big lump there, or, you know, they're hiding behind a tree that's skinnier than they are, and they're just kind of hiding their face, or just covering their eyes, like, I can't see you, so you can't see me. That's literally how I play these games. I'm so bad at them. Inevitably, somebody's like, oh, I'm going to set off a radar right here. And I'm like, oh, come on. You know, boop, 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 there she is. Oh, thanks. That was quick. But I really do enjoy them. I think it's an interesting kind of game from the beginning because at the beginning of the game, it's just different, right? A lot of games, the turns feel the same turn after turn. And I think in hidden movement games, more than some other genres for me, you feel a progression in the game. Now, if I'm playing, it may be a short progression in discovery and game end, but I really like that as you move forward and the hunt narrows in because your board area is kind of usually winnowing down and that kind of thing. So for me, Specter Ops, not good at it, but it's a lot of fun.
See, and this whole thing reminds me of, that scene in Home Alone, he makes his fun house of tricks and stuff for the robbers, and he kind of ends the scene with like, have you had enough? Or are you thirsty for more? That's kind of how I feel about this.
I that is perfect. Well, there you have it. Our first Game Pie segment. Feel free to share the games that you love, but are maybe not great at in the Dice Tower's Board Game Geek Guild. Every episode gets a little thread in there, so we'd love to see games that you love but maybe don't rock at. And hey, if you have ideas for topics for a future Game Pie, feel free to email them to us, or any questions you might have about gaming. You can ask Mandy about Animal Crossing since she's a pro at it now, that kind of thing.
I don't know about that.
You can send your questions to me at Suzanne@Dicetower.com.
And you can send them to me, and that's Mandy with an I, @Dicetower.com.
As always, everyone, thank you so much for joining us here today. It is always an honor and privilege to be part of your extended gaming family. Next episode, 657, it's go time for O Time, as Tom and Eric talk about their favorite O games. Until next time, I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandy Hutchinson.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Basil Memorial Fund is an organization dedicated to helping gamers in need. Learn more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackbasil.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Suzanne, Mandy, and Eric, with assistance from Roy Canaday and Rob Searing. Our theme is composed by Timothy Pinkham and arranged by Matt Bellier, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. All right, everyone, it is that time for Two Truths and a Lie. I will go first and do my reveal from last episode. I like pineapple on my pizza. I like pepperoni on my pizza. I like feta cheese on my pizza. If you guessed that I like pineapple on my pizza was the lie, you would be correct. Ew, that's disgusting.
And last episode I said I like pineapple on my pizza, I like pepperoni on my pizza, and I like mushrooms on my pizza. And the lie is that I like pepperoni on my pizza. I don't typically eat meat. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be pepperoni. And pineapple on pizza is amazing, Mandy.
Oh, dear.
Delicious. Nom, 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 nom.
We need to have a talk after, but that's for another time. All right, so new ones for this episode. Here we go. I own 10 plus Tea Turtle shirts. I own 10 plus concert shirts. I own 10 plus comic or series shirts. Ooh, something different.
All right. And for me this episode, I love lily of the valley flowers. I love hydrangea flowers. And I love rose flowers.
Yeah, I wonder where we got that theme from. Wink, wink. Well, good luck, everyone.